The following program contains shocking amounts of wit. If you suffer from dim-wittedness, this show might not be right for you. Check with your mortician.
If you want to be a dragon slayer, you may have come to the right place. This ain't no bread in circuses, you know what I'm saying? I'll be right back.
Proclaiming the truth in the highways and byways of the world. Fighting for justice in the dark alleys of politics. Raising the voice of resistance to a fevered pitch. And he knows where to find the best and worst jail food in America. Randall Terry.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. The saber rattling in North Korea is getting intense. Evidently, Dennis Rodman taught Kim Jong-un how to do a three-pointer. Japan, South Korea, and Guam. President Obama responds by saying, I'm going to take a 5% pay cut. Hey, if I can't manage a wild dog like North Korea, evidently I'm not worth $400,000 a year. And then Obama turns on the banks and says, come on, make some more risky loans. We need another financial crisis. What are you people doing? All right, quick word of wisdom from that fashion plate. Granny, jihad. That was weird.
Come, children. I tell you, great day when Apostle Muhammad digged trenches in which the heads of Jews roll. That was a day of victory for Islam.
Welcome to today's program, friend. In a moment, we will talk about North Korea, the saber rattling. We'll look into the concepts of just war and what would be at stake if we went to war, actually continued in a shooting war with North Korea, because we are at war with them technically. But first I want to talk about our messianic monarch, our socialist in chief, President Obama. Kudos to President Obama and to Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel. Both of them have said they're going to give some money back into the federal treasury. Obama said he'll take a 5% pay cut as a show of solidarity with federal workers. That means that he'll go from $400,000 a year to $380,000 a year. Now, I could be wrong, but my understanding is that basically everything that the president does is like an all-expense paid vacation. Because if he goes somewhere, Air Force One has to take him. He's got his bodyguard with him at all times. The White House is paying for the food. I don't see the president walking up to the pay counter at Denny's and whipping out his debit card saying, here, make sure you add 15% on that. Chuck Hagel, he's giving back about $14,000, 14 days pay rather, 14 days pay, and that number was $10,750. He's giving back that money to the federal treasury as well. Maybe it's going to start a little stampede among some of the high-level members of the administration to show their solidarity with federal workers who are being furloughed. All kidding aside, I think it was honorable of the president to do that. The end. This teaches us, ladies and gentlemen, that a broken clock is right twice a day. But the real issue is this, that President Obama is trying to score points with government workers, with unions, with people who are being impacted by so-called sequestration, all right? The mandatory cuts that have gone in to play, as of right now, regarding the federal budget. Have you noticed, and I know that this is going to come as a shock to some of you, but have you noticed that in fact, the sky has not fallen? The truth of the matter is this, as we've spoken about in other programs, that the federal deficit and the federal debt that is piling up from every annual deficit has become not only immoral, but arguably criminal, because it is enslaving our children. Every man, woman, and child in this country right now is carrying a $50,000 debt on their back to the people who hold U.S. Treasury bonds and other mechanisms by which the government borrows money. That doesn't include the unfunded mandates. It's immoral. It's a type of slavery, which is arguably criminal, certainly criminal from heaven's point of view. So Obama took a shellacking when it turned out that his closing of the White House had nothing to do with budget cuts, but just trying to make political points. That he deceived the American people when he said that the Secret Service made the decision. It wasn't the Secret Service. It was his political advisors, because it was a political move. And finally, the world has continued. All right? I know I'm repeating myself, but Obama said that there would be horrible, unthinkable repercussions if sequestration went into effect. And the last I looked, most of us are just fine. And there's not quite as much money being poured down the federal rat hole. All right, when we come back from this break, we're going to turn to that incredible madman with that incredible hairdo. And he's a proud new daddy, saber rattling, talking about lobbing some nuclear weapons at the United States, maybe Japan, maybe South Korea, maybe Guam. We don't know what the man can do, but I know how we're going to find out. Send Dennis Rodman. Dennis, just get him liquored up a little bit, just a little, in vino veritas, and get him to spill the beans, baby.
It's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I know you're here because you know what a good show is. That's why you're watching Randall Terry. Someday he might be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Yes!
Friend, you need to get this book. We Won't Get Fooled Again. Listen to this. I came to the conclusion that most folks were left over from the Reagan era who were no longer warriors, but are now either too old or unhealthy, and had compromised and become comfortable with the Republican establishment. They turned these organizations pretty much into direct mail fundraising fronts and were making tons of money and living the good life in beautiful mansions. The conservative movement had transformed itself from a very dynamic, principled organization in the Reagan years to a bunch of compromising, useless, and ineffective money-making machines. I'm reading to you from the new blockbuster book, We Won't Get Fooled Again, that names names, shows organizations, shows how they say that they're Christian, but they betray Christ, they betray biblical principles in the public square, and we are funding them. Go to the website, call us on the phone, and order it today. I'll send it to you for free if you want. God bless you.
One time when Randall and I were going to Oberlin, Ohio, we came upon a federal marshal who was picking up a runaway slave. The next morning, Randall got up early and pretty soon had everybody so riled up that they ran the marshal out of town. You might say that's where the Civil War started.
My country, right or wrong. That's not a good foreign policy, okay? If my country is wrong, I need to have the wisdom and the courage and the love of truth and justice to say so. If my country is right, I need to have the courage and the love of truth and the love of justice to push forward with the right, in spite of whatever costs it may have. As you certainly know, I don't know what adjectives to use sometime. I want to say demon-possessed leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-un, is now putting nuclear-laden missiles closer to the eastern coast, the eastern seaboard of North Korea, perhaps preparing for a nuclear showdown. I don't think that there is one that is actually going to happen. If there was a nuclear showdown with North Korea, I have a sneaking suspicion who would win, all right? But God forbid we should get into some kind of a conflagration that China came in on behalf of their wild dog, North Korea. That aside, what I want to do for the next few minutes is to sift through some of the pollutants that are in all of our brains because of the bread and circuses that pollute the airwaves, and do a little philosophy, history, and theology study on the concept of just war. All right? What is just war? A just war has to meet certain elements. The concept of just war in the Christian world began to be codified, and I say began, with St. Augustine. St. Augustine is historically considered one of the doctors of the church, and the just war theory, as philosophers and theologians and politicians understand it today, originated primarily, certainly in Western civilization, with the writings of Augustine of Hippo. He said that you had to have a legitimate authority declaring war. He said that you had to have a just purpose. It couldn't be for plunder. It could not be for self-aggrandizement. It had to be for the pursuit of justice. And Augustine over and over said that the goal of war is peace with justice. All right? So, those elements then were expanded upon by this man, commonly referred to as Thomas Aquinas, or Saint Thomas in the Catholic world, who in his Summa Theologica, if I said that right, he codified, and then other theologians and philosophers began to develop it even further. So you had the notion of punishing an evil. So the pursuit of justice might be that this group of people has stolen the Holy Land, stolen the church of the Ascension, has riddled the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, has stolen the site of Solomon's Temple, and is killing Christians as they try to go on pilgrimage to the Holy Land. And therefore, we are going to launch a holy war or a just war against the Muslim hordes who are ravaging Christian sites and Christian cities. By the way, historians in shorthand now call those the Crusades. Okay? The Crusades were just wars because the Christian world was trying to take back something that was stolen. There was the pursuit of justice. And by the way, I know I'm just a little bit far afield here, but this is interesting if you want to do some research on your own. What you're seeing on the screen right now is commonly called today the Jerusalem Cross. Well, that's a politically correct name that was given to not offend certain Muslim leaders. The actual name of this style of cross is the Crusader cross, because these 5 crosses, one in the center and then 4 evenly dispersed around the center cross, these 5 crosses represent the nations who responded to the call of Pope Urban to retrieve the Holy Land from the hands of Muslims. It's a Crusader cross, and it was done to stop the spread of Islam before Islam not only stole the Holy Land, but engulfed all of Christendom. You may remember that Byzantium Christianity, the Byzantine Empire, anchored and based in Constantinople, was completely lost to the Muslims. And the Muslims almost overran Europe on at least 2 occasions. So I leave you with this thought before we continue on with our discussion of just war. If you can't speak Arabic, thank the Crusades. I'll be right back.
If you stop watching Randall Terry, he'll know. Oh yeah, you better keep watching. Yeah, ow!
How would you like to be able to reach hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of potential customers with your product or your company or your web-based business? Well, you can do that right here on this show. Every single day, we get phone calls or letters or orders online from states all over the country where people are watching this television show. Right now, we are seen in 45 cities at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time every night, and then a rerun again at 12:30 midnight. You can reach them using this show at advertising rates that are so inexpensive, it would blow your mind. So, if you're interested, contact us at the phone number that you see on the screen or the email address, and we can talk about how you can grow your business and help support this show. Welcome back to the program, friend. Forgive me for going a little far afield from my notes for that last section, but I actually enjoy that study of history. And with all my heart, I thank God for the justice that was pursued in the Crusades. Yes, there were crimes that were committed by certain soldiers during the Crusades, just like there have been crimes committed in many wars, in many just wars throughout human history. For example, in World War II, to bring this back around to our discussion about just war, I would argue, as do most historians, that the bombing of Dresden in Germany was immoral because Dresden was not a high priority as a military target. It was primarily an old, historic, beautiful German city, and the people that were being incinerated in their homes and in their basements were mostly German civilians. One of the elements of just war is that you do not deliberately set out to kill non-combatants. Say that word again with me. Non-combatants. A combatant is somebody who combats, who is committed to combat. In other words, soldiery. And those troops that are around them, or civilians that are around them, that are committed to the war effort. Historically, women and children were not considered to be combatants. I know that in Vietnam, women and children were often strapped with booby traps and therefore became combatants. But the concept, historically, is that you do not kill non-combatants. You don't ravage and harm their women. You don't go in and plunder them. You do not burn their fields and their fruit trees. One of the elements of just war is that you do as little damage as possible and conclude hostilities as quickly as possible. One of the current elements of just war is also that you try and negotiate, because the effects, the long-term harm and horror of war are so horrific that it is morally obligated to pursue a just settlement peacefully before resorting to the last resort of war. All right? As the theory of just war has progressed, the idea of a preventive war or a preemptive strike emerged. A preventive strike would be what Israel did when armies were amassing on their Syrian border or on their Egyptian border. And Israel had the intelligence that they were going to be attacked. And so what did they do? Well, they launched forward into Syria and they attacked first. That is called a preemptive strike. A man pulls his fist back to hit you, and as he starts to swing, you're really fast, you've got some martial art move, and bang, you hit him in the throat or you hit him in the eye. It's a preventive strike. You don't have to wait, or rather a preemptive strike, preemptive. You don't have to wait for that nation to hit you if you know that that you are about to be hit. One step beyond that, and where we get into some serious gray territory, is a preventive strike. I believe the year was 1980, it might have been 1981, when Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin ordered 4 fighter bombers to fly under radar from Israel to Iraq and to bomb the nuclear reactor that was developing nuclear weapons for Saddam Hussein. the facts were clear that Saddam Hussein was going to develop a nuclear bomb and that he would use it against Israel. Of course, the question is begged that if they had not destroyed that reactor, 10 years later, when Gulf War I took place, what would have happened to U.S. troops? What would have happened in Kuwait? So even though it gets really murky and really scary, the idea of a preventive strike, it nevertheless proved to be very wise when the Jews bombed the nuclear reactor and kept Iraq from becoming a nuclear power. All right, I've got to take a break. When we come back, we'll bring this all the way around, and I have a quiz for you. Who is the only nation that has actually used a nuclear weapon against civilians? The bad guy in that scenario is possible, at least. I'll be right back. Friend, you need to get this book. We Won't Get Fooled Again. Listen to this. I came to the conclusion that most folks were left over from the Reagan era who were no longer warriors, but are now either too old or unhealthy and had compromised and become comfortable with the Republican establishment. They turned these organizations pretty much into direct mail fundraising fronts and were making tons of money and living the good life in beautiful mansions. The conservative movement had transformed itself from a very dynamic, principled organization in the Reagan years to a bunch of compromising, useless, and ineffective money-making machines. I'm reading to you from the new blockbuster book, We Won't Get Fooled Again, that names names, shows organizations, shows how they say that they're Christian, but they betray Christ, they betray biblical principles in the public square, and we are funding them. Go to the website, call us on the phone, and order it today. I'll send it to you for free if you want. God bless you. Welcome back, friend. North Korea in the news, saber-rattling, threatening a nuclear war with America, one that they would surely lose. And so you have to think that as crazy as Kim is, even with that hairdo, even if he wants to hang out with Dennis Rodman, he's really not going to do something that is suicidal. If he does, we might happily oblige him. But we might not. We might just use the firepower that we have to kill him and all of his upper leadership. We might use a very small theater nuclear device to kill 50 or 100 or 200,000 of his soldiers. The problem with large nuclear bombs is that they kill so many civilians. The answer to the question that I had before the break, who is the first and the only nation to use a nuclear device? That'd be the United States of America. First, with the bombing of Hiroshima, and second, with the bombing of Nagasaki. In early August of 1945, Germany had already surrendered some 3 months earlier. The Japanese were clearly going to lose the war, but they were entrenched in certain areas, and due to their honor and pride and the leadership that they had, some good generals and good admirals in the Navy, they simply were not going to surrender in the foreseeable future. This would have led to an enormous continued loss of American life in that theater of war, not to mention the torment and torture of the American prisoners of war who were being held by the Japanese. Therefore, President Truman decided that he would use the new bomb, which did not exist very much for very long, and that they would drop it or they would detonate it over Hiroshima. There were tens of thousands of people incinerated in seconds. In over two to a 4 month period, some 90 to 180,000 people died, most of whom were civilians, many women and children. The Japanese thought, well, maybe they've only got one bomb. Let's keep fighting. And so 3 days later, the Americans dropped the second bomb. That bomb killed between 60 and 80,000 people instantly or over the next 2 to 4 months with the fallout. By the way, Kim Jong, the names of those two bombs were Little Boy and Fat Man. Think it through. Do you really want us, little boy, little fat man, to be dropping nukes on you? I don't think so. I shouldn't even joke about it. But the truth of the matter is this, and I'm out of time. Most philosophers and theologians, though not all, would argue that what the United States did by dropping those nuclear devices over primarily civilian cities was not moral. They could have used them somewhere else. They maybe should have used them over a major base of Japan, but they terrorized a civilian population to cause Japan to surrender, which Japan did. And that is part of the argument that some use in favor of what happened. I'm out of time. Research this for yourself. God bless you.